Lauren Miller. So this one's an exciting one for me personally, because I've been now taking a look into your life extensively, and I have found that the subject somehow that you got yourself dropped into feels like it's not one that you would have put yourself into initially. So I really want to get into, first off, thank you for your time and being willing to stand up for what you do. But most importantly, why did you feel like you were the right person, or did you feel like you were the right person to stand up for women's sports the way you have?
Yeah. First off, thank you so much for having me here today. It's an honor to speak with you. With regards to your question about why I felt like I was called to stand up, as you pointed out, it was not anything that I expected or initially thought that I would get involved with, excuse me. But quite a few circumstances took place over, honestly, quite a few years that ultimately, the culmination, though, of losing head-to-head in a playoff against Hailey Davidson and seeing the rise of attention that got drawn to women's sports. Hailey had been competing for a couple years. Hailey and I had actually played together in 2021.
Oh, you didn't, no one caught on? This was really?
This was Hailey's first ever time competing in the women's division. And it's a U.S. Women's Open qualifier. So I'm going there thinking I'm only competing against other women. It's pre-Riley Gaines. It's pre-Leah Thomas, since all that happened in March of 22.
Right.
So no one's thinking about, men playing in women's sports. And so when I walked up to the tee that day back in 2021, there was a couple things that initially stood out to me, but at the same time, you're just not thinking this is a possibility.
Right.
The thought is, okay, they're 6 foot. They have a little bit deeper voice. And
who am I going to judge? Women are women nowadays. Okay.
Just didn't try to think too much, to think too much of it. But did notice a couple things throughout the round of just some major variance in how far the ball went. Sometimes it was closer to me. Sometimes the ball went 50 yards past me. And I was like, that's not normal to see that much variation.
Right.
But it wasn't until after the round when I had received a follow request from Hailey on Instagram, and Hailey's incredibly public about the transition that started back in, I believe, 2015.
Oh, wow.
And so it was, looking at this Instagram page and kind of being in just total shock that the rules were in place that allowed men to play in women's sports. That was the thing that was most frustrating to me, that was even a possibility. Like, why was that even on the table,
right,
for this to be an option? So, but at the time, I'm a sophomore or junior in college. Like, I'm typically just playing the college season and am not in the professional landscape at all. So this wasn't affecting college really. And so I just kind of go back to competing on my normal college tournament, since this was just a one-off summer event that anyone can play in, whether you're a junior, an amateur, college, professional, you can all go and participate in this qualifier. But I go back to school, and though it really upset me, I felt like I had no ability or no platform.
Or no recourse.
To really make a difference. I mean, the USGA officials, the LPGA officials, they don't know who I am. I'm a no-name in their eyes. I'm just a girl that's playing college golf at Mississippi State, and I don't have any real say. So I didn't make it through. Hailey didn't make it through. Nothing really, there's no real fallout. But then you fast forward, and I'm now a professional golfer, and I'm trying to kind of work my way up the ranks, and you're looking for opportunities to be able to play, because ultimately that's how you get better, right? You have to compete. And so I found myself playing on this Florida-based mini tour in the fall of 2023. And as I'm going to sign up for fields, I notice Hailey's name on a lot of the lists. And so I recognized that we were probably on a bit of a crash course of most likely getting paired together at some point.
And what year was this?
And this was fall of 23, so it should have been November of 2023. It was the first time that we were back in the same field.
And had you, sorry to interrupt, but had you been following his career? I'm sorry, his career,
yeah.
following his career. Have you been paying attention? Had you seen his name in other events, like on social media? Because now you've done the follow thing. So are you kind of clocking this human?
Was paying attention a little bit, but not much. I did have people, I think earlier in that year, Hailey did win on a other mini tour.
So hold on.
Yeah.
So Hailey had won, beat out a whole bunch of women, and nobody said anything.
No one did anything.
The media didn't say anything. Nobody clocked it. Nobody paid attention. No officials, no parents.
It was minor, if anything. I mean, if anyone spoke up, I mean, it had zero impact nationally.
And he had posted on his social that he had won or that he had played?
I believe so.
And still no one, huh?
Still no one.
Did you see, when you were seeing this behavior on social media, did you start to see things from more, I'm going to use some choice words, and I use them because this is my belief in them, and I don't want to characterize the way you work around that, but the cult that is this movement to change our young youth and make them believe that they can't be accepted as they are, as the way they were born, or even just be gay or bisexual or straight. That it feels to me like this very dark cult that just wants to grab young youth. Did this group of people continue to platform him and just like uplift him? Were they talking about him in the space? Because to me, it seems like anytime there is an LGBTQ plus 72 genders, it feels, you can laugh, it's fine. It feels like when somebody stands out and does really, really well, they seem to platform the hell out of them. Like Leah Thomas, he was platformed like crazy. That obviously came with a different attention with Riley Gaines. And I think she did such a brilliant job in being able to do that. And I think that's partially why he was as big as he was due to her, whether that's a positive for him or not. Regardless, it seems like they do platform their people quite aggressively. So did you see any of that from their movement, that they were like lifting this human up?
Not that I saw, but I also wasn't paying as much attention to it at the time. So unfortunately, I'm not really able to comment on how heavily it was pushed or how heavily Hailey was kind of being brought up by that community.
I just feel like
I
would have
been
seen. I mean, I just, for me, like I had never heard his name until I started looking into you. And in my mindset, I mean, any of these people that are successful in whatever it is they're doing, it seems like they use them as a poster child. Like you can go and you can still go do this. I mean, there's going to be several other situations we're going to get into, like the most recent one, I think it was an NCAA race run. And so I want to get into that after. But so you had seen some, but nothing too crazy. You go into these events knowing this is going to smash up. Were you nervous? Did you already have it in your head that you were going to say something? Like, were you only going to say something if he won? Like, how did that work for you?
Yeah, it's new territory. So I was trying a lot to figure out how to best navigate this. You want to, like, I wish that me just pulling out of the tournament would have been able to make a statement.
It would hurt you more than anybody else.
Exactly. You're desperate for opportunities to play and compete. And so, but it was weighing on me of, am I encouraging this? Am I openly showing that I accept this by continuing to compete? But ultimately, when we ended up finding ourselves in January of 2024, battling head-to-head, kind of the last two rounds, culminating in a playoff.
Right.
So we finished tied after 54 holes. And honestly, the wild part about it is I had the tournament won. I truly did. I had a 3-shot lead with 2 holes to
play.
And I'm standing in the middle of the fairway on the 17th hole with a wedge in my hand and absolutely hit the worst shot I could have hit and duffed it in the water and made double, which brought Hailey back into the tournament. Hailey made a impressive birdie on 18 to force a tie and go into a playoff. And, so it was just kind of, it didn't feel at all to me like this was a coincidence kind of as things played out. It was almost like, we ended up going into this playoff. We both birdie the first hole, and then I lose on the second hole. And that loss stung, extra hard for so many reasons. And, I'm driving home after the loss, and I'm like now really, really wrestling with this. Even though it had always bothered me, within the span of probably 24, 36 hours, I mean, this was national news.
Right.
I mean, it blew up.
And you had not said anything.
No.
So somebody else had caught it. I want to ask you a couple things about that last part of the tournament.
Yeah.
And again, I am conscious that this is an uncomfortable conversation. There are a lot of feelings around it because it did affect obviously your career and everything else. Although I'm going to say you're better for it, but I also, do you think that there were points in the game where he would have played worse just to keep it quiet and then maybe come out? Because like some of these shots I've heard about, and I've now been, like I said, watching the behavior, it seemed almost like, well, I'll just take it easy here. And then when push comes to shove, I'll show up like the guy that I really am.
I will say one thing I found definitely quite interesting was we went into the playoff, and again, I've played 2 rounds with Hailey, so I'm super familiar with how far the ball's going.
That's what I mean.
The swing speed. And, I will say there was quite the jump in swing speed.
This is my point.
Between the regulation and the playoff round. Whether I believe Hailey likes to claim, swung out of his shoes. Is like,
stop
so
it.
it's like I try not to go down that rabbit hole of speculating,
of
like, oh, is this intentional? I try not to do that as best I can, because to me, it's just not, it's like, I'm like,
you're
I don't
a better
really
person than me. You're such a better person than me. I feel like I know what you did and I clocked it. Thank you.
But I did definitely notice some things. I remember looking at my caddy and being like, "Did you see that?
Damn! How do we swing like that?"
That was different. And yeah, that I think the competitiveness kicked into another level.
Okay, so talk to me when you say you made that last into the lovely one. Do you think that some of your feelings and mindset thoughts, knowing that you were competing against him, were a contributing factor into that? Because I've seen, now that I've looked at some of your film and I've kind of seen some of the stuff online, you're really consistent. Your mindset seems to lock in really, really well. You don't seem to falter very often on big things like that. You handle pressure really well. So do you think that was a factor at all?
Yeah, I haven't considered it a ton. It definitely could be. I will say I hadn't won, or I hadn't been in a chance or been in the kind of with the opportunity to win since probably high school. So it had definitely been a while since I was feeling those nerves and feeling that you're right on the edge of trying to win a tournament and accomplish, something that means a lot to you and that you've been striving for. So there definitely was, a part of me too that it's like, you're always trying to be the best in the field. You're trying to be this competitor. And, ultimately while competing, I try my very best to be as respectful as possible of my competitors. But at the same time, I did not believe that it was right for Hailey to be there. And so underlying there may have been a little bit extra motivation to try to get a win. But at the same time, I was definitely still just trying to stick to my process as best I could. And, ultimately it didn't play out the way that I had envisioned. But ultimately, I believe that there has been my story's kind of been redeemed over this past year. Tenfold over. And my faith is super important to me. And so that's provided a lot of just like peace and security and this feeling that everything happens for a reason. And just seeing that, like, okay, had I not duffed that ball in the water, had I would have gone on to compete, maybe I wouldn't have found this courage to come forward, to stand up for women and stand up for truth and fairness and all that stuff. And fighting for this has been so much more rewarding and powerful and influential than anything I could do just playing golf.
Well, I think we're all put in positions whether we want to be in them or not, depending on how our life goes. And I think we all are given opportunities to impact change if we lean into it and we see it and we trust in it. And I think some people call it faith, some people call it intuition, some people, whatever you want to place your belief system on. I think that when we look at our journey in life, there's going to be moments where you can go, oh, that was a thing right there. That was a really important part. And if I would have leaned in, it would have probably changed things. Or I did lean in, and now look at kind of what happens when you just trust in the unknown. I don't think anybody at this point we're in 2025 now, I don't think that anybody at this point would have thought over the past 4 years or even prior to that the erosion of women's sports and rights would be what it is. I mean, you can go into the conversations around things like sports, abortion, you name it. There's the left, there's the right, and then there's something in the middle. And I think there's always been a little bit of an erosion around that. You were mentioning to me before that you come from a military family. And so that military family, I mean, it's been interesting to watch the United States military develop roles for women in places that women were not welcome in before. Now, there is definitely an argument, and I've heard this argument before made by several different special operators or otherwise, that women shouldn't be on the front lines. I mean, the new SecDef has mentioned it before, like that there's a role for women, but it might not be with combat arms. And it's a complicated one, but either way, women in general, we've kind of been told for a really long time that women can do everything, and we absolutely can. That being said, women and men are biologically insanely different. Our brain development is different. There's a lot of different research around, obviously, when somebody goes through puberty, how the body changes and develops. And so that's why I bring up the culty movement, because there is this concerted effort to make it so that we put children onto blockers and things so they don't go through those process, which erodes and damages the body long term. And I mean, there's enough statistics, we don't need to go through those, but it's just common sense when you tell someone they shouldn't go through puberty, it's going to have an adverse effect on their brain. And I guess for you, because how old are you now?
23.
Oh, you're such a little baby. So adorable. So when you look at your life at 23, I mean, did you ever think that you would have seen, you come from a family in the military, which means you come from a very, I'm going to guess, stricter, God and country, service, helping others type of faith. Did you ever think that this would be a route that you would be drug into in a women's rights? Like, I'm sure you were told you can do whatever you want to do. I mean, it's got to be a little bit of a shock.
Absolutely. Talking about it with my mom a lot, she could not believe that this was something that her daughter was going to have to deal with. And just to kind of make the story even crazier. In the sense
there's
of,
more.
there is more into how I knew that this was ultimately where God was leading me.
Okay. And brought to you by Ketone IQ. If you guys have not heard or seen me drinking these little bottles right here, you have been missing out. These guys right here are single-handedly the biggest part of my routine. Outside of the functional mushrooms, the movement, the sleep, the hydration, Ketone IQ is a number one most important tool that I use in my toolbox. And let me tell you why. If you guys have never experienced runner's high, give this a try. That flow state, it is for real. Ketones are a uniquely powerful macronutrient that can cross the blood-brain barrier, and they increase the brain energy efficiency. And every time you take a Ketone IQ, you're going to notice the radical boost in performance, endurance, and just focus in general. For me, I use this when I road bike, when I run. As a mother, instead of using caffeine after 12 o'clock, I go and grab a ketone. More importantly, I use it before I podcast, before I do keynotes or anything important in my life. You will see a ketone in my bag, on the table, or anywhere near me. So do yourself a favor. Once you're done listening to this awesome episode of the Kelsey Sharon Perspective, go on over to the website partner.ketone.com/Kelsey. You're going to save, go grab yourself a subscription so you never miss out and you always have the energy you need. Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Good Livin'. I am so excited to tell you about something that's become such a meaningful part of my wellness routine, Good Livin'.
Now, this isn't any brand. This is actually a brand I know all of the owners behind. And let me tell you, their integrity, their dedication, and their quality is the real deal. Their microdosing and functional blends are crafted with intention, and you can feel it. Everything is tested and made to support you in tapping into your own rhythm. We're talking about blends for anxiety, depression, and stress, ADHD, brain health, inflammation, sleep, and energy. Seriously, they have thought of everything possible. I know firsthand how much love they pour into every single product. So if you're ready to check them out and explore more, go to itsgoodlivin.com. And trust me, it's a journey worth taking. That's itsgoodlivin.com, itsgoodlivin.com. And make sure to use the code BRASS and get 20% off your first order today. And brought to you by XXXY Athletics. You guys can check them out at xx-xyathletics.com and make sure you use the code Kelsey20. That will help you save. I'm so excited to be a new ambassador of XXXY. I absolutely love what they stand for, and I'm proud to work with them because they are founded on truth, dedication to quality, and they are built for style and performance. Women deserve the opportunities that sports and single-sex spaces provide because sex matters at the end of the day. It is the single biggest determinant of athletic performance, and it's completely unfair and dangerous, as most of you know, to allow males who are XY chromosome to compete with girls and women who are XX in sports. You guys can share your stories just by doing the hashtag workout speak out. Tag myself, Kelsey_Sharon, and the XX_XY athletics on Instagram, and we will share everything. We need to get fit and speak our minds, mobilize into a force that fights back for women's sports. So start fighting. The way that you do that is go to XX-XY Athletics, go use the code Kelsey20 at checkout, slap on that gear, signal to the world that you are done allowing others to walk into female spaces. I believe in this brand. I believe in the mission. I believe in what they do. So go grab some now.
You rewind to spring of 2022, and I am earning my master's in sport administration from Mississippi State University while playing on the golf team there. And I'm going to kind of get my classes together, and my advisor looks at me and she says, one of your core classes is funding of sport, but there's only one professor and he's on sabbatical. And so the only other option is for you to take a PhD level gender and sport class.
Yes. Oh my God. That was like, those are the moments when you look and you go, oh, God's toying with me. And this is comedic relief at some point. I mean, okay, first off, can we just back up? Can you believe that in university, people are going to places and spending six figures on courses like gender ideology and women's studies? And I mean, women's studies is important, but like to do a PhD, what are you going to do other than teach? Also, why are we so focused on this constant breakdown and then attaching 72 genders? I mean, I saw this absolutely like comical meme the other day, and it was like all the way up to 2021, and it was like 2 genders. And then it was 21 to 24 was 72 genders, 25 and on, 2 genders. And I'm like, but that's, I mean, this, it feels like, you know, this goes back to, we've had this, this conversation has happened before where it's like when you start to look at the fall of a society, that's when you start to see the playing of genders. And you see this in I believe it was an individual that was on Rogan that was discussing it. It was a professor about how a society falls and really what happens within the communities. And one of the things they see is like this erosion of genders. And it's just kind of this fluidity. And again, do whatever you want to do. I really don't care. But what I do care about is when people like you get your entire life, and whether it's a positive or a negative, because it seems like it's worked out really well for you. That's still a lot of turmoil. That's still a lot of mental anguish. That's still your career, your studies, everything had to be affected, and your mindset. So academically, you did this course?
Yeah. So thankfully, this course was nothing like what I may have had if I was in a university in California. So my professor was, I'm at Mississippi State, so I'm already at more of a conservative university. And this professor that I'd had him for ethics in sport, philosophy in sport, so I was incredibly familiar with his teaching. And truly by the grace of God, he taught a class how you're supposed to teach a class.
Okay.
Where you cover you cover the left side, you cover the right side, you cover everything in between.
Yeah.
And he gave me this full picture and full understanding of both sides of this argument around, specifically, we covered half the semester was on transgender athletes.
Oh, wow.
And so I actually got to read scientific articles. I read the studies. Was able to do the research to actually see, yes, in this area, this area, this area, this is where women are, or this is where women are, this is where men are in terms of strength.
Right.
And so it was laid out incredibly well. My knowledge went from here to here on just my understanding of the differences between men and women, how those play out in sports. And he was like, I'm going to give you articles from both sides, and then you're a college student and you can break it down and you can study it and you can pick it apart and figure out what is actually correct and what is true to you. And what was even cooler about it was myself, one other student, and the professor. So we would sit in basically his office for 3 hours. He would give us articles ahead of time, and we'd come in and we'd break that article down every which way, and we would debate it and we would discuss it and we'd go through. But I just felt way more prepared than 2 years later to be like, oh, let me go back and dig in my brain and recall all of this information that I've looked at so closely. And it gave me a big boost in just my willingness to come forward, because I was like, I actually have studied this. I do have, a knowledge of seeing, the differences play out. And it was also happening at the same time as the Riley Gaines and Leah Thomas, races. And so we were even able to look at that like as it was happening. And so because of that, like that was a key reason also why I felt like I was being prepared ahead of time for this to be part of my story.
Right.
Even though I just thought that was going to be a class that I took that I learned a lot from, I was like, okay, well, now we're going to put that knowledge to use and we're going to hopefully do something good with it.
When you're reading all of those papers and you're seeing the left and the right and the middle, and you're kind of having these debates or these arguments or these discussions, how different, because it's got to be wild, how different were these papers and these viewpoints?
Very. They definitely, what I found a lot with the arguments from the left is they could make it sound really pretty, but as soon as you kind of found the weak spot and you pulled that string, the entire argument fell apart.
Okay.
But when I would read articles that were backed in truth, backed in science, it was just point after point after point that I was able to build on it, and it just felt so strong and thorough. And I was like, to me, it's so clear. This isn't about politics.
Right.
This isn't about anything else. It's just looking at the facts, looking at, what is true, what is reality at the end of the day. And it just became so clear that it's like we had to create women's sports for a reason.
Right.
Like, if it just came down to athleticism, how hard you work, women would just go play with men.
Right.
I mean, ultimately, like, take golf, for instance, it's not called the Men's Professional Golf Association Tour.
Right.
It's called the PGA Tour. It's an open category.
Right.
Anyone can go play. Women have gone and tried to play against the men a couple times. No one has ever successfully made the cut. And these are fantastic women golfers.
Right.
So it's not about, lack of ability. It's just strictly that there are these underlying, unchanging biological differences. And so in order for women to thrive and have this own space to be able to showcase their talent, it just has to be separate. And so that just kind of became so clear to me the more and more I was reading articles that were on our side.
It's so interesting because I think if we were able to just take a man and a woman and just very easily, like similar body types, even if you would, and put them in a similar sport, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It just doesn't matter at all. And it's very frustrating and infuriating to watch. Tomorrow I'm interviewing JC, and she's a Taekwondo fighter, and there's combat sports, and that's a whole different ball game. I mean, golf is an individual, and I could be wrong, very mental sport. And I learned that when I started playing, how infuriating golf can be.
The ball just sits there taunting you.
It taunts you. It looks at you and it says, you suck. and it's infuriating, but it's infuriating in a way that can help you grow if you use the tools that are given to you and you really learn how to hone in your own emotions. And so I see golf, obviously there's a strength component to it. I mean, they did a really great job. I know Netflix lately has been following a lot of different athlete sports, whether it's tennis, whether it's golf, whether it's F1, but they've been really kind of breaking down, sprinting, these athletes, and showing the mental component of it. And golf itself is a really fascinating one. I work with a few golfers now. I'm a mental strength coach and stuff. And so what I see with them is that most people think that golf happens on the course. A lot of it happens, personally, happens outside of the course. And it's what you bring with you that's going to affect your game. And the other thing, too, is it's individual. So it's all on you. It's 100% on you. So I want to go back to when you were younger a little bit.
Yeah.
You did grow up with a different type of family. You were not the only sibling. So walk me through what brought you into golf in the first place. What made you want to do golf? What made you have the individual sport mindset? Because team sports and individual sports are very, very different mindset, in my opinion.
Yeah. So youngest of 5. But we're pretty spread out. So between myself and the oldest is 17 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, mom.
So my mom's my parents are doing college visits with the oldest, and she's getting ready to ready to have me. But so he's 40, then it's 37, 34, 29, and then I'm 23. So, as much as I absolutely adore my older siblings and look up to them in a variety of ways, fortunately, growing up, they were getting ready to go to college, already in college. Right. So I wasn't able to be around them as much. But even, as I'm 2-3 years old, I want to be like them. I want to be doing what they're doing. So I had a basketball in my hand at like age 2. As soon as I could walk.
See that for you.
As soon as I could walk, I was dribbling a ball. Just super athletic family. Kind of played a big part for all of us. But I was born in Ohio, but with my father being military, he was active duty for 20 years and then retired, went back to work for the Air Force as a civil servant, and ultimately decided to take a job in Florida at Eglin Air Force Base as the chief scientist of the munitions directorate.
No big deal. That's not a big shoes to fill at all.
Yeah. Okay. But it was that move from Ohio to Florida when I was 6.5 years old that really opened my eyes to golf, because golf in Ohio is not existent. It's basketball, it's soccer,
right.
Those are the key sports. So those were my kind of first love was basketball. But when we moved to Florida, myself and my next closest sibling were, enrolling at a Catholic school about 30 minutes away. And so I was in first grade, she was in 7th, and my dad happened to be in the office and overheard that they needed a golf coach for the middle school team.
Volunteered.
And I mean, I love both my parents to death, but neither of them are great golfers. Like my mom actually taught my dad.
Okay.
My dad jokes all the time. He's like, people expect me to be a good golfer. And he's like, I'm horrible. I was a baseball player.
Okay.
But they've coached other sports. They were like, we've coached other sports. We know how to organize.
Right.
We know how to plan. We can bring someone in who knows more about the swing. But I'm obviously in first grade, so I'm way too little to play on a middle school golf team. But instead of doing after school care or anything like that, I was just at the course. So I was with them every day for practice and had a little set of clubs and was just immediately drawn to the sport and just drawn to the ever-changing variability of it, and that you can never perfect it. Like, you're constantly able to learn something new every time you go out there. You can learn a new shot. You're dealing with so many variables of the weather. I mean, every course is different. So it's like every time you tee it up, you're dealing with new things. But then you mentioned the individual element as well. And I think the further along I got into golf, the further along I also appreciated that it was on me, more so in the sense of I didn't have to deal with referees.
Oh, fair enough. Okay.
Like, I was pretty small, like an absolute twig. Like, if you looked at me hard enough,
I can't picture
you could
playing
probably
basketball
snap me in half.
Yeah.
But I'd get tossed around, and it was so frustrating, especially my parents on the side. They're like screaming at the refs, and there's not any calls. So with golf, like, it's just kind of, you get to be a little bit in your own world, and you're able to just really lock in on you, and also you're really competing against competing against yourself, and you're competing against the course. I can't really influence it all to what my competitors do, and they can't influence me if I, don't let
but your face can.
So it kind of just provided this new world where I was like, I can probably, if I work at this as much as I want to, and as much as I strive to, I get to kind of see where it could take me. And I still played basketball through middle school, and played soccer, but the moment that around 9 was kind of when the dream was like, I want to play professional golf.
Okay.
And then I was like, okay, well, what does that look like? That probably looks like going to college, earning a scholarship, having those opportunities to have that team element for a few years, which was amazing. But then I knew that was going to help prepare me for professional golf.
Well, the U.S. their colleges you guys' university and colleges are so different than Canada, where I'm from. And I was just having this conversation with Michael about it, because he's like, you guys miss out on like a completely different experience and we don't see, I mean, for me personally, I know we have a lot of scholarship opportunities if you're going to play within, but it's different sports, rugby, otherwise. But I see a lot of people I know who will become athletes, and they'll go down to college in the States and they'll get scholarships to go play in the States, because sports are taken incredibly seriously in America when it comes to college level athletes. Your football games, I was telling him, your football games are insane. They don't make sense to me. They seem bigger than the NFL. They seem bigger than the CFL. And it's like, I'm learning about the cult that is football.
I was about to say, you knew the cult.
She's a football player. And that's why I'm trying to figure this out.
Have you been to Texas A&M?
Okay, so I don't know. He went to a different school in college before he played in the NFL. And I don't understand. I've seen your Army-Navy game, and that's what I pay attention to because of the military, so obviously Army, but and because Navy, but I don't understand the grown adults, like what the grown adults who are not involved in the college at all, who don't have any kids in the college, they're just in the town. And they like sit around, and I was having this conversation. I was saying, they did this series on I think it was called like Last Chance U. And they did this series where they just follow these athletes, and it's like the town sits around and talks about these children as if they're gods. And I think about the amount of pressure that gets put on these kids to be these people at this age, which is like the most impressionable, where they're finding themselves, where they're trying to figure out who they love, who they want to fuck, who they don't, who they want to be obsessed with, who they want to be. And it's like the amount that goes into being that kid, because you're still a kid. Like, you really are.
Yeah.
It's so wild to me to imagine how much Americans put onto you guys as athletes. And so I can appreciate the amount of weight you would feel being an athlete in America. It's just so different than anywhere else in the world, it feels like. So for you with college, did you decide to go there? Is that where you wanted to be? If you went from Florida, I guess it's still hot. So it's a different type of people though.
Yeah.
That's a very different. So did you just go off, I'm going to get a scholarship somewhere, and as long as I get a scholarship to play, I'm going to go there?
So going into it, I knew I wanted to play Power 5.
Okay.
And ideally wanted to be in the SEC or ACC.
Okay.
Wanted to make sure I had warm weather.
Warm weather, Florida girl. Florida.
Golf is a lot more fun.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
In the sun. And I also did not see myself really going out west. And so I was like, all right, well, that kind of gives me this southeastern part of the country. And so I visited all over. I visited, schools in Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, even went up to like Kentucky area, the Carolinas, like kind of looked all around. And ultimately, though, I was trying to figure out, I was like, what is a school that I'm going to enjoy really being at? Where is what do they have what I want to study? Because academics have always been incredibly important to me. And then also like, what school is going to provide the best avenue for me to leave as, a woman prepared for hopefully a career in sports and a career after, just, being, just kind of being the person that I wanted to be. And so Mississippi State was like 5.5 hours away from home. It was small towns, smaller, like only 22,000 students, but still had
that's an insane number to me. I'm so sorry.
But compared to the Texas A&Ms of the world where there's 60,000 students, I was like,
nuts.
I like to be able to find a parking spot every day.
Right. Yeah, fair enough.
So just the little things. But I was like, Mississippi State kind of checked a lot of the boxes. And I also was going to college at 17. I was ended up being homeschooled from 3rd to 9th grade. Okay. And I'd skipped 6th grade during that period.
Just by choice, or? So
it kind of fed into my sister that was, the next closest. So there wasn't a Catholic high school. So then she just enrolled in like the local public high school. Okay. My mom was like, I don't really think the best decision for us is for me to continue to drive. And also she had been in the classroom like volunteering, and she was like, wow, there's so much wasted time in trying to get every kid on the same page.
Yeah, public school is a trip because I'm going to say, because public school, what we do know is a lot of times you're catering to the lowest common denominator, and not because they believe children are dumb. It's because you have a spectrum of children. And if you teach to the highest common, a lot of people are going to fall off and just not pass, and you just can't have that.
Yeah.
So
there was, and then also my dad was kind of traveling a bit for work, and we wanted to have that flexibility. And so we went into it with like, let's just try it for a year. Okay. And just kind of see what we think, and tried it. And the program that we did initially wasn't like online school or anything like that. Like it was just a Catholic curriculum that my mom had found, and we did it, and I really liked it because I was done in like 2 hours every day.
I was gonna say, you had so much free time,
and I was like, this is perfect. And my mom said, this is not pushing you hard enough. And so we ended up finding a curriculum that was called Classical Conversations. Okay. And it's like a practicum to where once a week I was actually in a classroom environment with like 10 to 12 other students that were also my age, and we just had like tutors for our different classes that were typically moms. But it was like a collective,
right?
Yeah, it did provide that once a week I was, being able to make a lot of great friends. And the program was incredibly rigorous. I mean, it put so much emphasis on like memorization, and they just had a very high standard of what was expected. And so, but the program was split. So it's like pre-K to 6th grade was called Foundations. Okay. And then 7th grade through high school was called Challenge. And so I had built a pretty good group of friends over that like 4th and 5th year, but they were all a year ahead of me. So they were transitioning into Challenge, and I still had a year left in Foundations. So my mom was like, I want to keep you with this group. I think they're going to be who best kind of pushes you. And so she was like, let's kind of petition, as well as do like 6th grade math over the summer just to make sure you're sharp. And then I started Challenge, and I also give that program so much credit for just me feeling comfortable even being in a situation like this, and like learning how to, engage in conversation, really pick apart topics, because we did speech and debate. We did mock trial. I took logic, like these classes that people really should be taking, but they're just not prioritized.
Or even offered at all.
Or even offered, yeah. And so that program really helped prepare me for kind of college. And then ultimately after 9th grade, myself and a couple other friends transitioned to dual enrollment. Okay. So I was doing like half homeschool and then half classes at my local college. So there was a group of 3 of us, thankfully, because I took my first college class at 14.
Oh my goodness. I was going to ask you a lot because I know how well studied you are. And that was one of my things is you're an overachiever, and it feels like, don't be sad about it. That's the thing you should be really proud of, in my opinion, because children, younger humans than me, they don't seem to value what it means to be able to learn. And I don't mean memorize, because I think there's a different reality between memorization and applicable tools and education. And I think the the mindset around homeschooling is shifting dramatically. But when I was younger in school, that was like the weird kids,
Yeah.
you know, the oddballs, the strange kids.
Yeah.
How are you going to socialize them? They're going to be socially awkward. They're going to be weird. They're not going to want to do anything. It's like, well, okay.
Did I turn out okay?
I mean, you turned out fantastic. That's why I'm asking. And I think it's really important when somebody says, I've been homeschooled and I did this type of curriculum. I think it's important to highlight because we are told for so long, and we have been for decades, that there is one option. And the thing that most parents or people, obviously, it has to be job dependent, financial situation, and not everyone can accommodate. I'm a person who knows that I couldn't teach my son because I understand the level of frustration I would experience. I'm not meant to be a teacher, but, and I've said this before, and a lot of teachers don't like what I'm about to say, including my sons, we have turned our educators into babysitters. Yeah. And it's because we put them in school for X period of time and they are teaching things that are easy, but there is no applicable way in life. So we're not teaching things like financial literacy. We're not teaching them how to use a debit card, how to file taxes, to look at the world and have really good critical thinking. And I have a client right now, oh my gosh, Paula, she's a writer, but her whole study is around teaching people how to be critical thinkers because that tool and that skill is completely eroded. And this is why I think we have so many individuals now choosing other either professions, choosing different types of careers that are not conducive for long term. And it's because they are not feeling equipped to step into the modern world and have the tools to critically think about the choices and the long-term repercussions, whether it's first, second, or third, and what it's going to look like down the road. So when there's a homeschooled kid that I meet or a human who's like, I have been able to thrive and then push myself, I like to explore that because if you were doing college level classes at 14, what that tells me is that how many other kids are in the system that could be just extraordinary humans, but we've told them either they can't sit still, which is most of the time they're bored out of their mind, right? They can't sit still, so you're not smart, you're kind of dumb. And that because you can't memorize or take a test in this very specific way, then you're not intelligent at all, which I'm a big believer. BC students make entrepreneurs, A's make factory workers. And that's how the schooling system was designed anyway, right? Comes from Germany, comes over here. How do we keep somebody in a desk for 6 to 8 hours a day? And then how do we get them and mold them out so all they ever do is the exact same thing in the exact same pattern? And then we wonder why our society is taking this weird downturn. There's no room for expansive thought to think outside the box, to come up with creative solution. So 14 years old, you were exposed to these hormone-driven college human beings. How is that for you?
Yeah, I typically would not lead with the fact that I was 14 because
probably a good start. I feel you would look like a young 14 too.
Yeah, because I mean, it would kind of come up, but thankfully it wasn't like myself and my couple other friends were the only ones doing this. Okay. It was pretty common that they had also what was called like collegiate.
Okay.
And so there were, instead of having even half and half, there were kids who were full-time high school students taking college classes.
Wow. Okay.
So, they're in the classes as well. There's other people doing homeschool and dual enrollment. So that was huge for me. Just, feeling like I wasn't the only one, because I think I would have been absolutely petrified, just be the only one. But I had a really good group of 2 to 3 friends, and we basically scheduled so all of our classes would be together. So we would never leave anyone alone. So that was a huge help, just to kind of have them to rely on and have as an extra source of just kind of comfort and being like, okay, there's a familiar face here.
But also
as I'm trying to navigate this.
The community that it helps you guys cultivate and showing the importance of holding each other together in situations, I think is something that we don't also see in schools, right? You see a lot of the mean girl mentality or the sports kids, but then you get these other humans who maybe just don't identify with these types of people, or they have something going on at home, so it manifests in a different way. So they show up differently at school. So it sounds like having programs like you were in really helps hold a community together. And I feel like obviously your faith is such a big part of that. So I'd love to look at that a little bit, because from what it feels like in the past 10 years, there's been this massive erosion of faith, this massive erosion of the family unit, the community, and pushing somebody towards their purpose. You talked to me a little bit at the very beginning about how important your faith has been for you in like walking through this path. Talk to me about how you would advise maybe some younger people who are struggling with faith or with their, I don't say their identity, but who are they in this big world of 8 billion people?
Yeah. That's beautiful. And it's such a valid point. I think having that family source was huge for me. Having role models in my parents that I could look to as just so stable, so strong. Like, you know, I knew that my parents cared so much, not just for myself and my sibling, but for each other. And that source of strength and their, willingness to serve the community, make sure that faith was always a priority, and having that witness, like even growing up, and sports got, more and more important, but they never got put ahead of faith. So even when we were on the road playing tournaments, we always found a Catholic mass to attend if possible. And so it was like that was able to be my source and my strength. And so I think if you're struggling with something, if you're wrestling with something, look to people who you say, I want to be more like them. Where does their source of joy come from? They seem to be people who are incredibly kind and encouraging and supportive, and they just are lights in your life. And reach out to them, find out more about what is that inner light that kind of helps drive them, because we all have so much to offer, but we have to be willing to ask, in order for people to feel comfortable sharing and pouring into you. And so having so many role models in my life, and not just my parents, but in my friends, even just in like early on coaches that I had in different sports, they kept really building me up. And then also just the community of just peers that I was able to build through golf. It was like we just wanted to do whatever we could to like lift each other up. And if someone was struggling with something, then it was like, hey, how can I help be there for you? Doing the reading, doing the hard work, like just digging in and not seeing something that's difficult or uncomfortable and then turning the other way, but being like, okay, yeah, this is hard, but let me sit with this, let me wrestle with this, and let me figure out how I can be, better moving forward. Like the goal should be, how can we be the best versions of ourselves? Because then we can be our best versions to the world. And two, just like, I got my parents this thing that now hangs in our house, and it was like, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. And it's like when you love your family and when you pour into them, then it just bleeds out into our world, which is, I think, the coolest thing.
You're an impressive human, hey?
That's very kind.
I say that. No, I don't say that a lot. I don't think I've said that to people.
No, it's very kind.
I just tell you if you suck. I mean that truly.
Well,
you can ask him.
Coming from the military community, I mean, my brother was an RPA pilot, so before every tournament, a lot it's don't suck.
Don't suck.
Yeah.
It's that's the truest statement. I got the privilege of meeting someone that's close to Michael, and we were joking around at dinner before he passed, and he said, if you just quit. If you suck, just quit. Just quit. And I remember saying like, oh my God, that's so real. Like, it's so ruthless. But I mean, like, just don't suck. I mean, there's so many ways to not suck in life, but I feel like we've taught our kids that they can quit.
Yep.
And that anything difficult, any adversity you face is something to be shied away from, and that it's something that you should always do your best to make your life as easy as possible. But I think it's in the hard things, it's in the difficult things, it's in the suffering, do hard things. And I don't even mean the Goggins way, because I think that sometimes can be taken and really made to be overblown and end up causing some people to do really, really well with that mentality. But then it can really break some other people who are not, like, they take it so seriously. And I think there's a nice middle ground where it's like, don't suck. And the way you don't suck is by putting effort into your life and putting enough effort in where you are starting to see the changes and the shift in yourself. And it doesn't have to be an overnight process. And that's why I brought about the faith thing, because I think a lot of people wrestle with who they are in the world, and knowing how young you are and seeing how like solidified. And I'm sure you're going to come up with new challenges and new things you're going to face, but having the mentality that you have, which is it's okay to do hard things. It's okay to pull things apart. It's okay to sit with something. And that was something that you said that it just really hit, because nobody wants to sit with their feelings. Nobody wants to sit with how something truly affects them and face it and go, okay, what is this that I'm feeling? Is this a projection of someone else? Is this about me? And if it is about me, how do I then... Or it's called the tickle test, right? So if I say something to you and I'm not saying it about you, but I'm just saying it out loud and it tickles on the inside, that's not mine. That's not mine. That's yours. And that's yours because something in me just triggered something in you. And most people will then lash out with an egotistical response to that. But really what should be happening is, okay, what about that really affected me and why? And is it something, a blind spot of mine, something I can improve on? And how do I improve on it? We're so quick to say to someone, you struggled. Oh, so let's quit or let's stop. It builds resilience if we just face it head on. It's that children's book, right? It's like, I gotta get a sponsor from that children's book. It's like, 'cause I say it so often, it's like, you can't go over it. You can't go under it. You can't go around it. You have to go through it. Right. And those life lessons are just not being taught. And it seems like they were really drilled into you in a really positive way, not in a way that has broken you down psychologically.
Yeah, absolutely. That, like, the way my parents poured into me paired with this kind of shared, or this big inner desire to be like, how do I get myself, as we talked about before, golf is so mental.
Right.
Like, how do I find that edge? And these last kind of year or two, I've really kind of digging a lot deeper into reading books that better me. And the key ones that I've read so far has been Mindset by Carol Dweck, and like that understanding of how much our language affects the way that it plays out in the world, and just the difference between, as you were saying, like if we just call a kid smart and then they get one seed and they're like, well, no longer smart anymore.
Not smart anymore.
But, training that ability to persist and work hard and learn how to do something was really helpful for me, because I started to realize all the ways that you think you're being kind to someone by just being, but it's like, actually I need to be pouring into you in terms of your effort.
Yes.
And it changed how I talk to myself, because I was like, I need to now focus on all of these elements of, okay, what am I doing and how am I doing it to be better, and fall in love with the process and not, the result. And like, this kind of thing that took over was like progress through process. And like, that's how I'm going to get, to where I want to go, is by really devoting myself to that. And so, that book was huge for me and just kind of gave me this like whole new light. And also, helped me be secure in my identity and like who I am. And, because of that, and just, as we talked about, my faith and being like a daughter of Christ, like that played also a massive role into my willing to speak up, because I was like, these words that might get thrown at me or that people might try to tear me down, they're not going to hold any weight.
Right.
Because I am sure in who, the creator of the universe made me to be. And that has provided such strength and such comfort going through all this stuff over the past year.
Because you have gone through quite a few things. And I mean, I've seen the words you're called. I don't need to repeat them. They're aggressive and they're quite derogatory. But like you said, if you decide what words affect you, and you decide which ones you're going to give weight to, and you are the sum, right? You are the sum of the five of everything. That literally everything that you touch, see, environment, doesn't matter. And so if you can have an incredible positive self-talk and you are able to reverberate that to yourself, your body and your cells are hearing that just as much as they're hearing anything else, right? So it's like the 80-20 rule. It's like, if I can hear 20% of just absolute dog shit, like this doesn't have to affect me at all. But if you're hitting it 80% of the time with this really positive affirmation, and I'm not talking about the I love myself. I mean, but that works too, because some people do not love themselves. And so to somebody who's like, well, that's silly. I mean, there's times where I've given other people things to say where I look at them and I go, oh, they're going to hate this. They're going to hate this, but you're going to do it. I'm going to tell you why. But it works. And if you constantly hit it over and over and over again. It's no different. Neuroplasticity is an incredible thing. Our brains work. If we actually took a second to understand how our brain will receive something and our body energetically will receive it, we can then feed it what it needs rather than what we think it needs based off of some weird Instagram post most people have found. I want to shift a little, though, too, because I think it's really important to talk about some of the new legislation that has come out with President Donald Trump in. And people can say, Kelsey, you're Canadian, you can't have an opinion. I super have an opinion. I served with the Americans. I pay U.S. taxes. I work in America. I love America. And I think that Trump is great for America. You don't have to like the person. You don't have to like the way he talks. You don't have to like the way he moves. Most people don't like the way I do all of those things. But if you're able to get things done, it's like where you put your money where your mouth is. Show me what you're going to change. Show me how you're going to do it. And show me how you're going to make something better. Within, he's been affirmed for now, 10 days. And he has passed more legislation, more bills that are not only going to help American citizens, which need to be the priority in America. And one of the ones that I saw recently was the U.S. House passes bill banning trans athletes from competing in women's school sports. The legislation, which advanced 218-206, came as an increasing number of states have passed laws banning trans athletes from participating in sports from K to 12 schools and college that align with their gender identity and amid a wider GOP-led push. And so this was so important. And then he just signed the executive order to seek ending gender-affirming medical treatments for children and teenagers under the age of 19. This directive came on last Tuesday, when he signed the executive order to also ban transgender troops from serving openly in the military. On his first day in office last week, Trump signed an order recognizing two sexes, male and female, and taking aim at what order described as gender ideology extremism. I would love to know how you feel about those, because I know how I feel.
Huge win.
Yeah.
Huge win for America, without a doubt. I mean, is sports my platform? Yes. But do I care about this in general? Absolutely.
I'm assuming you want children one day, yeah?
Exactly. Yes. And so seeing, what Trump is already doing, seeing him follow through on what he had promised is incredibly empowering and just makes me very excited for the future of America and just feeling like truth is coming back, reality's coming back, sanity's coming back, and we are appreciating, again, these objective truths, these objective realities that have to remain in order for our culture to continue to progress, to continue to thrive and move forward in a way that is helpful and beneficial. And the thing that, really hits home the most is with regards to these children, and protecting them, because that was what was it's been so sad to see, just how these ideologies have really hurt people who are just struggling. Like we all struggle, like we're all going to have highs, we're all going to have lows. But instead of kind of going about, different ways to figure out how do we think about this, long term, how do we make sure that we're doing things that, are ultimately going to be what's best for them in the future. And ultimately, as they get down the line and they're adults, if that's the decision that they want to make, then that's the decision that they want to make. But I mean, when you're 8 years old, you don't even know what you want for breakfast.
It's a frustrating place to be. I'm a parent, and it's a wild thing to witness what schools have done with this. And in Canada, we have this program called SOGI. It's called Sexual Orientation and Gender Identification. And British Columbia, Alberta, which is Texas of Canada, which is wild that they allow this, and Ontario, or Ontario, as most people call it. I'm from there. So we allow this this non-accredited system to come into the school systems and teach this ideology. They have sections in the libraries that are transgender books. My son's going on 9, and I remember in kindergarten, he came home with a book called Jacob's New Dress. And it was a trans non-binary book. And I remember calling the principal going, what am I looking at here? Because at what point do we look at children and go, they are malleable. They are, you can influence a kid very easily. This is why we have things like stranger danger. This is why we have things like don't go with the guy with the puppies and the candy, because we understand on so many levels that children can be manipulated. into believing that they are cats. And when you allow mentally ill individuals to step forward and say, it's totally okay, you should have litter box in the classroom, you have to wonder what world you're living in. And then I also look at you and go, who hurt you? Because when you look at the way somebody perpetuates behavior, whether it's, I had this conversation, who was I talking about pedophiles with? Dr. Leslie Dobson. Sorry, I know this is going somewhere. I'll bring it back. But Leslie is a forensic and clinical psychologist. She does a lot of different stuff on social media. And now this new word is being propagated called minor attracted person.
Yes.
Okay, you get it. And
in Canada, there's like the 50-year-old.
Oh, in Ontario.
Yeah.
So the 50-year-old in Ontario decided, I love Ontario, relax, everyone. The 50-year-old decided that he was going to wear a child's pink bikini and go into the children's locker room and shower with the young girls. And yet, what blows my mind, and this is the question I always have, is I understand you never, as a human, just biologically, we do not want to be outside the tribe. We do not want to be, like, we knew that, right? You were on the plane, something went wrong, you left, they left, you're dead. You never want to be ostracized from a community. That being said, you're a parent of a human that you made with your body, and you put them in an environment you expect them to be safe. Now you know the environment's not safe. Why were none of those fathers or those mothers in there grabbing that person by the hair and dragging them out and going, you have got to be out of your damn mind if you think that you're going to be in there with my underage little girl and normalizing? Because last I checked, one of the ways we groom people, and Alana Stott is she's so impressive on this. You two need to have a conversation. She works in human trafficking. And one of the ways, because grooming is not illegal, right? But trafficking is, i.e. Andrew Tate grooms, he doesn't traffic. This is why he can do what he does. It's just grooming. There's no laws against it. So people groom people by very simply doing things like, and there's a ton of videos like this where there's a lot of touching. So very young, like the parent will be very touchy-feely with the child, like overly touchy-feely. And that becomes a normalized behavior. Well, somebody can touch me and it's not weird. My parents did it, I'm safe. Then you have things where it's like, so you go from the touching, then you have things that's like normalizing seeing a grown adult's genitals in an environment where you're not listening. Like deep down, we as people, we feel that something's wrong. Like that intuition is real. If you listen to yourself, it'll talk. That's just the truth. Your nervous system naturally, just because we're humans, will talk. You'll feel the hair on your arms stand up. You'll get the shivers down your spine. That's your body talking to you. We just numb it out and go, oh, that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. So you're constantly contradicting your own natural instincts to say, I don't feel safe. So then what we do is that then tells that child, I can be exposed to a grown adult. That's normalized. That's safe. It's like introducing, and why you see such issues with younger individuals being exposed to porn. And the way that they move through life afterwards when it's an extreme amount very young, especially when it's really aggressive porn. There is ways to groom people, or like the lover boy method. There are ways to groom people where it seems innocent. And this movement, by allowing grown adults in change rooms to expose themselves to young adolescents, is kind of signaling with their adult present too, right? So their safe person's there. And this kid's looking up going, this doesn't feel right. But the parent going, no, it's okay, sweetie. We don't want to be hateful. We don't want to be hateful. But really what you're doing is you're discounting and telling that child's nervous system, that's actually safe.
Yeah.
That's okay to be around. And people are probably going to say, well, Kelsey, that's not exactly okay, but it is. And that's how our nervous systems know. We know when something's not safe. But when you override it and you tell a young child, don't trust your own instincts, don't trust your own belief. This is how people get put in situations that are not okay. Furthermore, the person that you're supposed to trust, that's supposed to keep you safe, has just told you it's okay. Yeah. So like, why as grown adults are we not protecting our children? And why are we saying that it's acceptable for a grown man to be doing this? And that's where I kind of want to go next was, you have this movement, again, like we spoke about at the beginning, now trying to add minor attracted persons in and say, how dare you discriminate against somebody that can't control it? I'm of the belief,
Mm-hmm.
There are certain things that are not redeemable.
Mm.
And some people have a different belief set, but we understand how pedophiles' brains work enough to know that this stuff you can't rehab it. A person who expresses sexual gratification or attraction to a younger, minor person, more often than not, and Dr. Leslie Dobson says this as well, this is not something we can fix, right? She told me very quickly about a situation on our last interview where she would go into a prison and there was this very known pedophile, and he could not literally even have newspapers because if he saw a photo of a child, he would rub it on his genitals like that. So there are extreme cases, obviously, on the spectrum like anything else, but anybody who is attracted to a younger human, I believe, needs to be taken somewhere else. They're not safe. And we shouldn't, the part of the problem then becomes, well, we can't retroactively take someone if they're not acting on it. But you know, one of the biggest things we see going to Vancouver in particular is a lot of South Asian individuals coming in with extreme amounts of child pornography on their possession. And there's a lot of trafficking, and I mean a lot of trafficking, not too far from where I live. And it's the South Asian gangs that are pulling people in and out. And so this normalization of younger and younger and younger individuals, and this idea that it's okay to groom them or not protect them from individuals like going into your change room and saying, oh, it's okay for a grown man to be exposed to you when you're a child. I feel like this is part of the problem. And the general public doesn't want to say anything. The parents don't want to be the hateful ones. So there's another good example in Ontario, a rugby game. Or recently there was another rugby game. It was a college level rugby game. And this dude ran through women like I have never seen. Then you had the NCAA, the last running event that you saw. And it looked like you were watching what did I just witness? It's like there was no comparison in any way that could have been an acceptable race. And then you've got Leah Thomas. You can be the absolute worst in the male category, but somehow you can come out and say that you're the best in the female category. I mean, come on. Where are the adults? Where did the adults go? That's what I want to understand.
Right? Yeah. I mean, where are our legislators? Where were the people coming forward? Where were the parents? Where were all that saying enough is enough?
Right.
Absolutely not. And you touched on it with, well, I just want to be nice. I want to be accepting.
You want to be Canadian.
But that's not nice. That's not helpful. That's not really actually loving the person. And it's especially not caring for all of the other women and all of the other girls who are devoting so much to this. Why are we not thinking about them? Why is, this one person prioritized?
Right.
Why are we accommodating when they're still free to play sports?
Right.
And no one's saying you can't play sports.
Just because you suck in your gender doesn't mean you get to come win ours. Sorry.
But, if you want to go, if running means that much to you, go run in open categories. If sports to you just mean that much and you're just about playing and all the other benefits and everything that sports provides, well, you're more than welcome to. But this women's space, it has to be protected or it will cease to exist.
Right.
And, if there was a world where we could just all play golf together, all compete together, then okay. But that's not the world that we live in.
Right.
And we're seeing that. And that's exactly why you didn't have Serena Williams at her prime playing against Federer. She's
amazing, but
incredible.
Oh God.
I mean, 23 Grand Slams, the best, period. But it's just that there are these underlying anatomical, biological, physiological differences. And that's okay. I think people forget that. Like, it's okay that we're different.
Right.
It doesn't mean that women are so far below, so far inferior. It's like we're just simply different.
Right.
We have still incredible athletic ability, incredible prowess. But in order for that to actually be showcased, it has to be in a space that is women against women.
What do you see next for the LPGA, and what do you see next for athletes like you and these little girls that are kind of watching you and watching Riley and watching JC and watching all of these females step forward and say enough is enough? Like, what do you see next? Because obviously with this new executive order, this is going to cover college and this is going to cover high school and elementary. But what about pro sports?
Yeah.
I mean, is it a separate category?
Yeah.
Is it a male, a female, and a trans category? Like, how do you see this moving forward?
Yeah, like you talked about, the executive order is a huge step in the right direction, but it isn't an instant fix.
No.
I mean, there is still a lot of work to be done, and throughout even like the state levels. I mean, there's so many private competitions. There's so many things that take place that don't receive government funding. So there's a lot of women and girls who may still have to continue to compete against men unless we get this culture change, unless we continue to just keep standing up, keep saying, no, it's not okay, it's not right. And so while the LPGA and the USGA have taken strides, like back in December of this past year, they did change their policy. So the policy is an improvement. It's by no means perfect. They weren't able to go all in on XX only period. They transitioned the policy to, if you've transitioned post puberty, then you're banned. If you transition pre-puberty, then you would be acceptable. But that's now why this new, government order in this executive order is huge for golf, because that, is hopefully going to be severely minimized, the amount of children who are going to, undergo surgery as pre-puberty. So I do think it's moving in the right direction, but there is still so much work to be done, and hopefully over these next few years people will realize that the amount of people that are on our side is so much greater than those against. It's just this minority has been so loud, and they have made their voices very well known and well spread. And for a lot of the general public, I mean, they're just doing what they can to put food on their tables and care for their families, and they're not able to potentially step into this big advocacy role, even though they agree. But it's the conversations that you have at home. It's doing the little things. It's maybe a conversation just here and there in the office. It's traveling and wearing an XXXY hat, just to let people know that.
They don't love that, by the way. I was gonna ask you about that, and the XX, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that is a statement. Where I have the big hoodie that says that
Save
on the front
sports.
of it, and it's baggy, and I wear it places and airports, and oh dear God, people are not for that. I mean, they are, but I feel like they see it, and part of them wants to say like yes, but other parts of them want to say like there's I want to say there's a bravery in wearing that stuff, but there's an inherent stance you take when you put on a piece of this clothing, which I stand for very clearly, but it definitely is saying something, which I think is needed.
Yeah. It's worth it. It really is. Like, I know that not everyone has shared this same sentiment, and I know that the criticism and stuff that Jen receives is far worse than I have. I feel like I have been incredibly fortunate where my peers, people that I come in contact with on a daily basis, it's been probably 50-1 in who has supported me and then who has maybe challenged me on it. But I do think people who have played sports and experienced sports, they get it a lot easier than someone who does not have the sporting background, because they've lived it. They're able to understand and have seen probably firsthand, there's just no way that a woman should box against a man. Like,
that's insane. That dude has still not been stripped of that medal.
I mean, it's that one to me is so obvious.
It's so hot. What broke my heart is who she fought. I don't know if you saw her last fight with her father and everything that had happened, and just like, going through a loss and then coming back and being able to fight again, and then having to face that. And then having to face that, you know what it takes. You start becoming a professional athlete as a child. You have that mindset of this is where I'm going. And it literally takes that long to become that good at something. And then you put somebody that can punch you in the face in front of you. And you've been told your whole life, boys do not hit girls. And yet the Olympic body stood by that, who was supposed to be the pinnacle of being a great athlete means you go to the Olympics. But then you have cheaters, because that's what he is, in my opinion. You don't have to repeat anything I say. He's a weak man who is insecure and a cheater who cannot hack it in his own category. So he goes and beats up on women. Last I checked, that's somebody who assaults somebody. That's somebody we put in prison in America for assaulting a woman. You don't hit women, let alone go to an Olympic gold medal fight, and the rest of the world stands
and
there
get praised for it.
And get praised for it. Oh, and my favorite was the amount of DMs I got from people who were also of a similar religious faith, who were like, how could you say that? That's a woman, and that's what their chromosomes. And then I would be like, so super hard no on that. And then later to see the medical report come out that was leaked and to show that it's a man. It was always a man, just like all of us had said. So the hard part then, I guess I'm curious for you. You work with NXXXY, which obviously stands for, save women's sports, keep women's sports. But moving forward, when a man walks forward into these categories, how do you advise these women to move? You've got the volleyball teams facing with men. You've got other fighters. You've got rugby teams. You've got boxers. You've got taekwondo fighters. Do they just forfeit? Do you make a stance that way? Do you fight them and get the shit kicked out of you? Because honestly, if it's a combat sport, I mean, look at the UFC. Do you remember that athlete that came in and beat the living hell out of a woman and didn't tell him it was a man? Like, what hill do we die on, and how do we do so?
Yeah, I do think it's probably situation dependent. Do I think the most powerful stance is to potentially walk into the arena and then walk out? Sure. I mean, to just say that, absolutely not today. I'm not doing it. And I think there also is a little bit of variability in terms of like the professional level. Say this does rise, to the top of, for instance, tennis. If that were to come into play, as far as to my knowledge, it hasn't gotten there yet, but say that was on the rise. Professional sports is entertainment. And so if there's no match to watch, there's no money.
That's what I mean.
So, that is an incredibly powerful statement. If a woman says, if they're willing to risk it all for something that is, so much bigger than themselves. And I think that's the thing that women are starting to realize more than anything is like, part of my reason to come forward, I was like, it's not about me. It really isn't. Like, it's not about me. It's not about Hailey. This is about like principle. This is about my peers. This is about women in general. This is about women's sports. This is about the next generation.
Right.
And it's like, that's who we have to think about. And seeing these like women volleyball players come forward and stand in unity and stand in solidarity and forfeit matches over this is incredibly impressive and shows such bravery that they shouldn't have to be doing. Like, they shouldn't have to be giving up this thing that they love so much, but their willingness to do that for a bigger cause is, I think, should really encourage people and say, wow, like, look at what they're willing to sacrifice.
Right.
And then push someone further to say, okay, well, then how can I make a difference too? How can I do something small? I mean, if you just go on NXXXY, if you go and you purchase stuff, it's like you have that opportunity to just like give $1 to, the Independent Council on Women's Sports who's fighting for this. Like, yes, you may not have a platform, but as we talked about earlier, just the way you pour into your family, the way you pour into your friends, like that's the ripple effect that bleeds into the world. And so even if your platform's small, even if it's massive, like we can influence each other through having really hard conversations. And by looking at this, by digging deep into it, by studying it, but more than anything, just like remembering that, yes, these individuals are human beings, and but at the same time, we can't sacrifice truth in order to affirm someone else. Like, there has to be that firm line of truth and reality has to come before inclusion. And, and is that a part of sports? Sure, but it can't be the priority.
Right.
It can't be what comes. It can't displace everything else. Because without fair rules, you don't have sports. I can't go play baseball with the rules of golf. Like,
your dad would hope that, though.
We can't mix and match.
Right.
There has to be these clear defined boundaries. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, sports are not sports, and golf is not golf, and baseball is not baseball. And so, I think my hope and prayer is that more and more women and men say, I am willing to potentially sacrifice my brand image, quote unquote, or my marketability to fight for something so much bigger than just myself. It's not, to say, if people view me as too political, too polarizing, truth is still worth it.
Right.
And fairness is worth it. And women are worth it, and girls are worth it. And it's not about me, because it's really not just about one of us. But I understand that, especially in women's sports, the money is already little.
I was just going to say comparative.
So I think that is a big source of why there is also that struggle, is because that's, you're trying to make a livelihood in this. And so you feel like you need these brands to back you and support you. So it is hard, and it's a very difficult decision to make. But in the big scheme of things, in the long term, I want to tell these people that it's worth it. I know I'm doing it on a much smaller scale, and I haven't had the same, potential sacrifices to give up. It's not that I'm sponsored by Nike and I'm risking a Nike sponsorship.
Why would you want to be sponsored by a company that is very, very much like, we don't care about women's sports? Furthermore, we build hijabs now so that we continue to oppress women, so that when they run, they can be continued to be oppressed, and we support that. Fuck Nike. Sorry, I'm not for it. I really don't care. If you are a company that is good with that continuous suppression of women's rights, and then you're also super good in not standing up. I mean, the new individual that came forward, why won't you say that it's not okay? Like, why are you allowing athletes like that to come in and destroy women's sports and not speaking up for it? Isn't your whole brand, you can do it? Like, isn't that the whole brand? So then shouldn't they just do it in their own damn category? I don't understand why that's rocket science or hard. And how many companies, for example, Bud Light and others, how many companies need to learn the lesson the hard way? How many makeup brands need to stop putting men in makeup? How many clothing brands or bathing suit brands or otherwise need to stop building children's bathing suits to tuck their penises in women's girls? Like, at what point? I guess what's the number? What's the number? Because everybody can be bought. Everybody can be silenced with a number. And we see that time and time again. So what is the number? Because Nike seems to have no bounds when it comes to them not standing up for women. I have a real disdain for the hijab, personally. And I just had on Yasmin Mohammed. And Yasmin was a forced arranged marriage with the number 2 who planned 9/11. Okay. Her ex-husband is still in prison, thank God. She is actually from the town I live in British Columbia, where she experienced the extremist Islamic violence in Canada, where she has a great book called Unveiled, where she is often and frequently, because she would mispronounce the Quran, tied up by her feet and beaten within an inch of her life at the age of 6 and 8. And when she had a child, this individual, because the family was Egyptian, was going to take her daughter to go have the genital mutilation done to her. And that's when she decided, like, I'm not letting this happen to my little girl. And she was actually approached by CSIS when she was in the hospital with her mother, which is our FBI, and was like, hey, we've been following, and now he's in prison, and showed her, and she was able to get out of it. She now runs Free Hearts, Free Minds, which is an organization that helps people leave the extremist version of Islam and Muslim. And she speaks incredibly open and emphatically about the suppression of women's rights with the hijab. And furthermore, you can take it all the way over to Afghanistan, where I have an extensive amount of personal experience in, and you can see the erosion of women's rights now from the moment that we pulled out in that atrocious abortion of a pullout that was caused by Biden's inadequacies to not only prepare properly, but have a ton of individuals killed unnecessarily, unneeded. And then you see girls' schooling has now been taken away. They're no longer allowed near the windows when they cook. They're no longer allowed out of the homes. They are no longer to use their voices out loud. And it is the erosion of the rights of women happening in these countries. So when people like Nike go out and build other tools that can be sold, and people can say, well, Kelsey, that's their religion and that's religious freedom. I'm sorry, I don't care. It's a suppression tool. It's been proven to be seen that way. And if you look at anything pre the extremist version of Islam in any of these nations, you can go back and look at Kabul and the women walking around in the 70s getting ice cream dressed like you and I were right now. You cannot tell me this is a part of the religion. This is a suppression tool. So when Nike builds those for their runners or otherwise, I'm not for it. I have a real problem with it. And people can say, well, you're a white woman who's Catholic. Okay, say whatever you want. I've been to the country. I've seen how it's used, and I've experienced it myself. So I wish companies would be more like XX and say, we're not participating in anything that is going to suppress women, hold women down, or somehow signal to them in any way, shape, or form that we do not support them in what they do, the category they do it, and how much effort it took for them to become the professional athlete that they are. So lastly, and most importantly, for any of the women or mothers who have children, whether they're boys or girls, what would a message be to them from you that you took away from your childhood or what you've had to go through now and building that resilience that you would want them to take on and carry through their lives?
Yeah, that is huge, right? Like those, what we undergo and what we experience as little girls and as little boys. And just, that was what a lot of what sports taught me was like, you talked about that resiliency. And just that idea of, even as we touched on earlier, just being willing to do hard things, but also zoom out and say, my life has a ripple effect. And we cannot live in isolation. Everything that we do depends on someone else. Someone has to build everything. They have to build the house. You have to get water. Like, we are so blessed in, Western countries and in first world countries with all of these incredible opportunities that we have. And so we know that everything that we do plays a part in affecting other people. And everyone has a story to share. Everyone has influence. And so understanding that if you choose to place, your rock and your foundation on, things that are bigger than just like your career, bigger than like fame, money, power, but are on like who you are as a human being and investing in that, then ultimately you're going to be able to grow up and have this determination and resiliency to say, okay, how can I be the best version for myself and in the world? And so I think my biggest thing is just encouraging people to realize that, like, you're worth it, but also like your peers are worth it. And I know I use that word a lot, but it's just true. Like, you don't have to squish back into this hole and think that, I can throw objective reality out the window. But just being willing to stand up for something bigger than yourself and understand that like I still am pursuing a career. I'm still like pursuing golf. I'm still trying to win trophies and do the best that I can. But when you're a part of something that is bigger, it provides this fulfillment and this redeeming kind of, it just kind of gives you this new look and this new outlook on the world itself. And so not being afraid to invest in either the smallest thing or the biggest thing, but it's like all of those investments add up. So if the way that you can make the world a better place is by just being a great mom and dad and just going home every day and being, you know, a middle-class worker, like be the best at that. But if your job is you're the CEO of a top company, then, you know, you need to be the best at that too. And that looks like looking out for that middle-class worker. And so we all have these different levels of influence, but they're all valuable and they're all important and they all, you know, shape our world. And so we need to understand that we can do a lot of good in this world if we're willing to put the work in and if we're willing to recognize that we want to see our society thrive and continue to progress in the right direction and not shrink back. And so I know I'm rambling a bit there.
No, I'm here for it. No, I think these messages are all important. I think they all will hit somebody in a different way and they will all resonate in a different way. And I think that's the thing that's really beautiful about your story. And you're going to continue to grow is because you have the conviction and you stand in it all the way. And I think that's why you are an incredible example. And I meant it when I said it. You're an impressive human. And I think more people need to be listening to what you have to say, especially at the age in which you're saying it. It shows that you've done the work, you've gone through the real hard things, and you've come out the other side. And with that comes wisdom. And it doesn't matter how old you are. People are put in situations that they're supposed to be in, regardless of age. It's up to you whether you take the lesson from it or you just see it as something negative that happened. It's what it turns you into.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really beautiful. But now I've depleted all of your energy before you go drive.
I do have one more thing I'd love to add. Because as you talked about just the mental piece, like who I am as an individual from a year ago could not be more different. Like you can take your hard situations, like what I went through was, like we talked about, nothing I ever expected. Nothing I ever thought would be a part of it. But your attitude and your outlook affects everything. And so I chose to say this situation sucked. But what do I do? You know, so what, now what? And, you know, you fast forward a year and balancing professional golf and balancing fighting for women's sports. And then literally just 2 weeks ago, almost a year to the day, where do I find myself? In another playoff. Like, you know, it was almost a year to the day from when I had lost. And now I find myself back in this playoff. And I'm like, all right, here we go again. It's the first time back in a playoff since everything had happened. And I was like, who I am now and just the way that all this has gone, it's affected me and pushed me to be way stronger mentally than I've ever been before. And ultimately, you know, I just know God was sitting up there laughing and he was like, I had this all worked out because I'm in the playoff. The very first playoff hole, I have almost the exact yardage of the shot that I duffed in the water the year before. This ended up a lot better. Hit it close, made the birdie putt and won. And I just couldn't help but laugh. I was like, just that redemption and just that feeling of we can make anything into something better if we approach it the right way. And if we're willing to look for the good. And so I look back and I'm like, all right, this year was a roller coaster, but I wouldn't have changed it. It was what God was calling me to. It was what he was preparing me for ever since, I was 6 years old picking up a golf club. He knew this would be part of my story. So embrace what comes your way is my biggest thing. Trust in your people, trust in your family, let them pour into you, and see where it takes you.
That's so beautiful. All right, Miss Thang, before we do this really good tasting, because now they've changed it and it tastes like peach, which thank
I'm
God,
pumped.
guys. Thank you, Michael, for coming
There
out
we
with
go.
a better tasting ketone. Can you tell everyone how they support you and how they uplift your message? Like I said, there's some humans out there doing this, but it takes a village. It takes more.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that people know how to find you and support you, not just with XX, but also with what you do with golf. And whether that's just sending messages, whether that's sending emails, whether that's just showing up and giving you a following your story, or just showing you as an example to their children. I think you're a great example to have. So how do they support you?
Thank you. Yeah. So at this point, in terms of my professional career, I'm early on. So working my way up, hopefully within the next year or two, Lauren Miller will be on the TV screens coming up, playing on the LPGA. That's the ultimate goal. But in terms of me individually, support means the world. I mean, as I'm starting out, the money is very little, so you're scraping by. And so, I appreciate just words of support. Those definitely go a long way. But if people are interested in working with me or getting to know more about me, or even just, I love the opportunity to talk with this next generation and help provide wisdom. So even if it's just, you need someone to talk to, or you're trying to figure out how to, speak up, reach out to me. I'm on Instagram. I think it's like Lauren with
We'll tag
2 N's,
we'll tag
whatever it
everything.
is. Instagram's a big one for me. But yeah, reach out to me, and would love to get to know people and hear more about their story, and just continue to share the good news. And hopefully all the good things come our way.
So you're killing me with the hope thing. So here's the thing: I can the coach and me can't help. We don't hope, we will.
I love it. Yeah.
Okay,
I like it.
When we see you on the TV in
When.
the LPGA,
Yes.
when it's not, it's not. I hope, it's when and will.
You're right. That is.
It's not
that's
about
a good reminder.
I'm sorry. It's not even. I have to. It's like every part of my body is screaming at the top of my lungs when we will. We will.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
I love that, and that's a great reminder. Like we talked about, power of words.
Power of words.
Yeah.
All right, Miss Thang, you're gonna like this. I promise. Lots of energy, lots of focus. Cheers.
Here we go.
Enjoy. It tastes so much better. I promise. I wish you would have seen some of the other ones I had to give people.
I'm pumped.
I told you it's a whole shot. It's a whole shot of sugar.
Spilled it a little on myself.
And by sugar, there's no sugar in it. I don't know why I said that, but it's a whole shot of ketone. So if it makes you feel any better, which I know it will, I'd like to see what you think of it, because I think it would be good before you play.
Yeah.
It's good for focus. But
Unfortunately, spilled a little, but
that's all right. If it makes
tasted great, I promise.
if it makes you feel better, I've done the same thing several times. Missed my whole mouth, actually. So it's been cute. You're not the only one. But most importantly, we'll put everything in the show notes so people can support you, find you. I think you'd be a great keynote speaker, especially for up-and-coming athletes. I think that you're an incredible example. And everyone else, thank you for listening. We'll see you all next week.
Thank you.